The studio had barely recovered from the tension of the initial exchange when the show resumed from commercial break, but the atmosphere was nowhere near settled. Johnny Depp sat comfortably, almost too comfortably for Joy Behar's liking, as if the entire confrontation had been nothing more than a passing breeze. His composed demeanor only irritated her further. The audience, meanwhile, buzzed with anticipation. They leaned forward in their seats, sensing that whatever was about to unfold would be even more dramatic than what had already transpired. Joy forced a smile, stiff and strained, attempting to reassert authority as the cameras rolled again. "Welcome back," she said, her voice only barely steady. "We're here with Johnny Depp, who apparently has a lot to say today." The remark was intended as a jab, but Johnny simply nodded, offering a polite smile. "Only when I'm asked," he replied softly, which drew another wave of laughter from the audience. Joy's smile faltered. She shot a quick glance at the producers, but they had learned their lesson from the first segment. This time they stayed back, unwilling to interrupt unless absolutely necessary. Trying to regain ground, Joy pivoted to a new line of questioning, this time focusing on Hollywood culture, fame, and personal responsibility. Her tone carried the unmistakable edge of someone determined not to lose control twice. "Don't you think," she pressed, "that celebrities often hide behind charm instead of accountability?" Johnny raised an eyebrow. "Charm doesn't hide anything," he answered. "People see what they want to see. Accountability is a conversation, not a weapon." The audience murmured in approval. Joy's eyes narrowed. She shot back, "Are you implying I'm using it as a weapon?" "I'm saying," Johnny responded calmly, "that conversations work best when they aren't designed as traps." It was subtle, but the impact landed hard. Even Whoopi, who had been unusually quiet during this round, let out a soft whistle under her breath. Sarah's eyes widened, and she tried to diffuse the tension with a light comment, but the energy in the room had already shifted too dramatically for small talk to take hold. Joy leaned forward again, intent on pushing harder. "Well," she said sharply, "if you feel so trapped, why did you come on this show?" Johnny let out a soft laugh, not mocking, but disarmingly genuine. "Because your producers invited me," he replied. "And because I believe in conversations. Even difficult ones." The simplicity of the answer, paired with his unwavering calm, made Joy's aggressive tone seem increasingly out of place. The audience applauded again, and Joy's frustration became almost palpable. Her co-hosts exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether they should intervene or let the moment unfold. Joy pressed her lips together, then attempted a different angle, asking about public perception and whether Johnny believed he had been treated unfairly by the media. It was a risky move. Johnny paused thoughtfully before responding, his voice measured and soft. "Unfairness is part of life," he said. "But it becomes dangerous when people stop listening and start assuming. When the story becomes more important than the truth." The weight of the statement hung in the air. Even the camera operators seemed to freeze, sensing the significance of the moment. Joy tried to respond, but her words caught in her throat. Johnny continued, leaning forward slightly. "People deserve conversations that are honest, not fueled by agendas or expectations." The audience erupted in applause once more, this time louder and more supportive than ever. Joy visibly struggled to maintain composure. Her co-host stepped in, sensing she was about to push the interview into territory from which it would be impossible to return. Sarah gently redirected the discussion toward Johnny's film project again, giving Joy a moment to breathe. Johnny answered gracefully, describing the creative inspirations behind the movie, but even then, his responses carried undertones of the previous clash, reminding everyone that he had not been shaken. Instead, he had emerged even more composed. By the time the segment wrapped up, Joy looked drained while Johnny looked completely untouched, as if he had walked through a storm without getting wet. The audience rose in a standing ovation as the cameras faded out. The damage was done, the moment immortalized, and Joy's attempt to challenge him had only made his presence more commanding. The energy behind the scenes during the next break was chaotic, stage managers whispering frantically, assistants darting in and out with cue cards, and producers debating whether to tighten control over the discussion or let it run wild for the sake of ratings. But when the show returned from commercial, the decision was clear: they were going to try to smooth things over, hoping the tension would settle naturally. It did not. Johnny Depp sat with the same quiet, unshakable presence he'd maintained from the beginning, his expression thoughtful and slightly amused. Joy Behar, however, carried the unmistakable stiffness of someone determined not to be overshadowed a second time. The cameras rolled, and Whoopi began with a measured tone, easing into a gentler topic: creative inspiration, artistic identity, and Johnny's ability to reinvent characters across genres. For a moment, it worked. Johnny spoke eloquently about his craft, the importance of immersing himself in roles, and the joy of collaboration in filmmaking. His words flowed with a steady rhythm that captured the audience's attention effortlessly. But Joy couldn't let the equilibrium settle. The moment Johnny paused, she cut in with a pointed question that had nothing to do with creativity or film. "So," she said sharply, "do you think your fans defend you because they admire your work or because they ignore your flaws?" The audience reacted instantly, a mix of gasps and low murmurs. Johnny didn't flinch. He turned slightly toward Joy, his expression calm, unannoyed, almost curious. "Why does it have to be one or the other?" he asked softly. "People can appreciate a person's humanity and still see their imperfections clearly." Joy pressed on. "But don't you think celebrity culture makes people blind?" Johnny nodded thoughtfully. "Celebrity culture can distort things, yes. But so can television," he said, gesturing subtly toward the cameras. The audience reacted again, louder this time, while Joy stiffened, caught off guard by the unexpected direction of his answer. Sarah tried to lighten the atmosphere with a soft laugh, but Joy leaned forward, unwilling to back down. "You're deflecting," she accused. "I'm asking whether you think people defend you because they choose not to see the full picture." Johnny smiled gently. "People defend what they believe in," he said. "If they see honesty, they defend honesty. If they see injustice, they speak up. It's not blindness, it's perspective." Joy opened her mouth to counter, but Johnny continued, his tone warm but edged with unmistakable clarity. "But I also think conversations like these often frame people in extremes. As if we're only heroes or villains. That's not real life. That's theater." The remark landed with precision. The room exhaled in a mixture of laughter and shock. Even Whoopi leaned back with raised eyebrows, impressed despite herself. Joy, however, looked increasingly rattled. She wasn't used to being outmaneuvered, especially not on her own turf. Trying to regain footing, she launched another question, this time framed as a concern for public narratives. But before she could fully articulate it, Johnny gently interjected. "Joy, I appreciate the conversation," he said, his voice level. "But if your questions are meant to start a fire, I'm not interested in burning with you." The studio erupted. Applause, cheers, even a few whistles rose from the audience. Joy blinked, stunned, unable to mask the shock on her face. She hadn't expected direct confrontation, she expected either defensiveness or avoidance. Instead, Johnny delivered a boundary with grace and firmness. Whoopi stepped in quickly. All right, let's keep it moving," she said, half laughing, half desperate to steady the ship. Joy tried to speak again, but the energy in the room had completely shifted. Johnny now carried the conversation with calm authority, while Joy's interruptions seemed increasingly ineffective. The audience leaned toward him, not her. The co-hosts deferred to him, not her. By the time the segment approached its close, Johnny was answering questions not with defensiveness, but with a wisdom that left the audience hanging on every word. Joy, for the first time in the episode, went quiet, realizing that every attempt at confrontation only strengthened his presence. As the camera zoomed out for the outro, Joy forced a smile, but the tension in her eyes was unmistakable. Johnny, on the other hand, sat peacefully, giving a soft wave to the audience as they erupted into applause once more. The producers knew instantly, this episode was going to be remembered. And Joy knew it too. Backstage, tension buzzed like electricity. Crew members whispered to one another, exchanging quick glances between Johnny Depp, who remained remarkably calm, and Joy Behar, who was pacing with a stack of cue cards clutched in her hand. She looked like someone preparing for a final round in a match she had already lost twice but refused to concede. When the floor manager signaled that they were live again, everyone braced themselves. The previous two segments had already spiraled far beyond what anyone expected, and the third was poised to be the most unpredictable yet. The camera panned across the table as the hosts settled into their seats. Johnny sat relaxed, shoulders loose, hands folded in front of him. Joy, meanwhile, inhaled sharply, unable to hide the determination burning in her eyes. The other co-hosts exchanged silent warnings, "Don't escalate this again," their expressions seemed to say, but Joy was clearly not done. Whoopi opened the segment with a neutral tone, attempting yet again to steer the conversation toward safer territory. She brought up Johnny's philanthropic work, a topic guaranteed to win audience support and offer the kind of soft storytelling daytime TV thrived on. Johnny responded warmly, describing the importance of supporting children's hospitals and artistic programs. The audience softened, visibly drawn into his sincerity. But Joy couldn't stand it. The moment he paused, she dove in. "That's all very nice," she began, her voice carrying the unmistakable edge of challenge, "but don't you think it's convenient to talk about charity when there are other things people still want answers to?" A collective groan rippled through the studio. Even the sound technicians winced. Johnny didn't react immediately. He took a slow breath, then turned his head toward Joy, his expression clear, unthreatened, almost compassionate. "People always want answers," he said gently. "But wanting answers and wanting confrontation aren't the same thing." Joy's eyebrow twitched. "So you think I'm just trying to confront you?" she snapped. Johnny held her gaze. "I think you're trying to create a moment. And I understand, this is television. But I didn't come here to play a character for you." The audience gasped. Not loudly, but sharply, like a room full of people who had just witnessed a truth they weren't supposed to hear. Sarah and Alyssa exchanged looks, unsure whether to intervene or let Johnny finish. He continued, voice steady and warm. "I'm here as myself," he said. "Not the version painted online, not the version debated by strangers. Just a person. And I think conversations work better when we remember we're all just people." Joy froze, momentarily speechless. The rare silence from her side of the table made the room feel even more charged. She attempted to recover, leaning forward, but her next words lacked the force she intended. "Well, people also expect accountability. And they should," Johnny replied without hesitation. "But accountability grows from honesty, not hostility." The studio erupted into applause, spontaneous, loud, impossible to ignore. Joy looked stunned, unable to stop the momentum that had clearly shifted away from her. The applause continued for several long seconds as Johnny nodded appreciatively, not basking in the praise but acknowledging it with humility. When the noise finally died down, Whoopi stepped in like a referee calling the end of a fight. All right, she said with a wry smile, "let's try to keep this civil." Joy forced a laugh, but it sounded brittle. "I am being civil," she insisted, though no one, including herself, seemed convinced. Johnny gave a small, gracious smile and redirected the conversation back to creativity, art, and the importance of resilience. His voice carried no bitterness, only a calm assuredness that seemed to fill the entire room. The audience listened closely, enthralled. Even the co-hosts leaned in, relieved that the final segment had returned to something resembling harmony. But everyone knew that the earlier clashes had already overshadowed the rest of the show. As the outro music began and the camera pulled back for the wide shot, Joy sat stiffly, trying to maintain a smile, while Johnny lifted a hand in a relaxed farewell. The crowd rose in another standing ovation, loud, unified, undeniable. When the lights dimmed, Joy exhaled in frustration, while Johnny remained exactly as he had been from the start, calm, unshaken, and unmistakably in control of the narrative. It was the moment the entire studio knew, this episode would go down in daytime TV legend.